Johnny Cash was born in Kingsland, Arkansas, on February 26, 1932. The son of poor Southern Baptist sharecroppers, he was one of 7 children born to Ray and Carrie Rivers Cash. Unable to agree on whether to name their son Rivers or Ray, his parents settled on simply calling him JR. Growing up during the Great Depression brought its own share of hardships. The family eventually relocated to Dyess, Arkansas, where Ray Cash took advantage of New Deal agricultural programs launched by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. There, they lived in a modest 5-room house and worked 20 acres of cotton and seasonal crops. Like the rest of the family, young Johnny toiled long hours in the fields. His only escape was music. It surrounded him from every angle. The folk ballads and hymns his mother sang at home, the work songs echoing through the fields, and the gospel music of the Pentecostal Church of God, which his devout mother faithfully attended. Unsurprisingly, Johnny began singing at an early age. As a child, he had a high tenor voice that later dropped to his trademark bass baritone. His parents, quietly impressed by his gift, scraped together their remaining savings to pay for singing lessons. But after only 3 lessons, the teacher told him to stop. Johnny's natural voice was already so distinctive that the instructor warned him never to change it. At age 12, Johnny began writing his own songs, often as a way of processing emotion. One of the deepest wounds of his childhood was the death of his beloved older brother, Jack, who was 2 years his senior. Jack died in a tragic accident at work, and the loss left a deep mark on Johnny. Once known for his bright personality and sharp sense of humor, he grew quieter and more introspective, often retreating into solitude and songwriting. Jack's final words, describing a vision of angels, had a lasting spiritual impact on Johnny. According to his sister Joanne, on the day of the funeral, he arrived early at the gravesite, barefoot and with a swollen foot after stepping on a nail. He picked up a shovel and helped dig the grave. His clothes were dirty from the effort, but he stayed through the service in that state, a quiet symbol of his grief and loyalty. Throughout his life, Johnny remained devoted to his brother's memory. Just as some Christians ask themselves, what would Jesus do? When faced with hard decisions, Johnny would quietly ask himself, what would Jack do? Despite his passion for music and songwriting, Johnny Cash did not initially dream of a career on the big stage. In 1950, after graduating from high school, he left Dyess, Arkansas in search of work and briefly found employment at an auto body plant in Pontiac, Michigan. That same summer, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. Since military regulations required a full legal name, he could no longer go by just JR, so he officially became John R. Cash. He completed basic training at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio before being stationed in Landsberg, West Germany, where he served as a radio intercept officer, monitoring Soviet transmissions. According to legend, Cash was the first American to learn of Joseph Stalin's death, receiving the news via Morse code. During his off hours, Johnny returned to his true love, music. He taught himself a few chords on a guitar he had purchased in Germany, and formed a small band with a fellow serviceman. Though he later admitted he sang poorly in those early days, he also credited alcohol for giving him the confidence to get on stage. But more importantly, he discovered something profound. He liked performing. He liked bringing music to people. It was during those years in Germany that Johnny first began to envision a future in music. After completing his service, Cash married Vivian Liberto and moved with her to Memphis, Tennessee. There, while working as an appliance salesman, he continued to nurture his musical ambitions. He formed a trio with Marshall Grant and Luther Perkins, 2 auto mechanics who worked with his older brother, Roy. The 3 bonded over their shared love of gospel music and would gather at each other's homes to play. Cash, strumming a beat-up $5 guitar he had bought overseas, naturally became the group's frontman. They began blending gospel with country and blues into a raw, rhythmic sound that would later define Cash's musical identity. Marshall Grant would later recall in his memoir that, while he didn't consider Johnny a great singer, he was struck by the power and presence of his voice. In 1954, the group, now calling themselves the Tennessee 2 and Johnny Cash, took a leap of faith. They walked into Sun Records in Memphis, the same studio where Elvis Presley had recorded his debut single just months earlier. They tracked down Sam Phillips, Sun's legendary producer, and asked for an audition. Phillips agreed but was underwhelmed by their gospel repertoire, warning them that religious records had limited commercial potential. He told them to return with something original. According to one Sun Records employee, Phillips liked Johnny's voice and told him bluntly, "Go out, sin, and come back with a song I can sell." Though Cash later denied hearing those exact words, the message was clear. That night, he sat down and wrote, "Cry, Cry, Cry." When he brought it back the next day, Phillips agreed to record it, pairing it with another original, "Hey Porter," as the B-side. Backed by Perkins on guitar and Grant on bass, the recording was a success. Both tracks gained regional airplay, and soon Johnny Cash's music was in rotation across the South. Cry, Cry, Cry tells the story of a woman who cheats on her man and is left alone to weep over her mistakes. It's not just a heartbreak ballad, it's a bitter parting shot. The man doesn't mourn. Instead, he almost sneers. "Someday, you'll cry for me." Its success lay in its simplicity, an instantly catchy melody and a hook-laden chorus. Hey Porter, on the other hand, captured the excitement of a soldier returning home from overseas, longing for the American South. These two songs established the themes that would define Cash's career: unvarnished, emotional storytelling rooted in the lives of ordinary people, set against the backdrop of a vast and sometimes unforgiving America. And with that, Johnny Cash was off, releasing hit after hit as he blazed into the mid-1950s, already forging his legend. Johnny Cash's rise continued with his next single, Folsom Prison Blues, which climbed into the top 5 on the country charts. But it was I Walk the Line that launched him into national fame, topping the country charts and crossing over into the pop top 20. The song, both a vow and a confession, was written as a personal promise to his wife Vivian, a pledge of faithfulness and self-control in the face of the temptations that came with fame and life on the road. To capitalize on his momentum, Cash released his first full-length album in 1957, Johnny Cash with His Hot and Blue Guitar, featuring standout tracks like Ballad of a Teenage Queen and Don't Take Your Guns to Town. The album's sound was a bold and innovative fusion of country, rockabilly, blues, and gospel, a style that set Cash apart from his contemporaries. As his fame grew, so did his ambitions. Just a few years earlier, he had walked into Sun Records as an unknown, but now he saw himself as a star and believed he should be treated like one. Sam Phillips, however, didn't fully recognize the long-term potential in Cash's music. Feeling underappreciated and underpaid, Cash accepted a far more lucrative offer from Columbia Records. It came with more money, more prestige, and more demands. By the early 1960s, the pressure of near-constant touring began to take its toll. Cash was on the road for up to 300 nights a year, performing with his band, now rebranded as the Tennessee Three, and increasingly joined by members of the Carter family. His marriage to Vivian strained under the weight of his absence, and the family relocated to California in hopes of a fresh start. But the chaos only deepened. Cash began drinking heavily, and soon became addicted to a cocktail of amphetamines and barbiturates. At one point, he shared an apartment in Nashville with fellow musician Waylon Jennings, who was also heavily addicted to stimulants. Cash used drugs to stay awake during his grueling tour schedule. Friends would joke about his nervous energy and erratic behavior, often overlooking the seriousness of his spiraling drug dependency. Yet, even amid personal turmoil, Cash's creative fire burned on. He channeled his intensity into the recording of Ring of Fire, a song that became one of his biggest crossover hits, topping the country charts and reaching the pop top 20. The track centers on a fiery metaphor for love, comparing its intensity and danger to falling into a literal ring of fire. The blazing mariachi horns added a distinctive, almost hypnotic edge to the song's haunting message: love as both ecstasy and destruction. The song's authorship, however, remains controversial to this day. Officially, it was written by June Carter and songwriter Merle Kilgore, but Cash later claimed he had dreamed of the arrangement, having heard Anita Carter, June's sister, sing it and imagining it set to Mexican-style horns. That version became the hit. Adding fuel to the mystery, Cash's first wife, Vivian, later alleged in her autobiography that Johnny himself wrote the song while high and drunk, supposedly inspired by an intimate part of a woman's anatomy. Whatever the true origin, Ring of Fire brought massive success to both Anita Carter and Johnny Cash, further cementing his place in music history, even as his personal life continued to unravel. Johnny Cash's drug abuse eventually spiraled into a series of increasingly destructive events. He separated from his wife, Vivian, in 1962. Then came the darker years of the mid-1960s, which brought a string of disturbing incidents. An arrest for smuggling amphetamines across the Mexican border, and another for accidentally starting a wildfire in a California forest. The nadir came in 1967, when Cash was found by a police officer near death in a small Georgia village, dazed, drugged, and physically wrecked. It was June Carter, along with support from the entire Carter family, who helped pull him from the brink. With their help, Cash leaned into his Christian faith and entered drug treatment, beginning a remarkable personal transformation. Their connection deepened, and soon love followed. On February 22, 1968, Cash proposed to June Carter on stage at London Gardens in Ontario, Canada. They married just a week later in Franklin, Kentucky, after Cash had proven he was clean. In 1969, Cash debuted The Johnny Cash Show, a groundbreaking variety program that brought together performers like Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, and Louis Armstrong. But it wasn't just a music show. It became a platform where Cash addressed major social issues, from the Vietnam War and prison reform to Native American rights. That same year, he won 2 Grammy Awards for the raw, electrifying live album Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison. The idea behind the album was more than bold. It was defiant. Cash performed and recorded a live concert inside Folsom State Prison, one of California's most notorious maximum security facilities. This wasn't just a performance. It was a symbolic act, a direct challenge to polite society and a message of solidarity to the forgotten, the punished, and the voiceless. For Cash, this performance was deeply personal. He had come dangerously close to prison himself. He saw in the inmates versions of himself, men who had made mistakes, taken the wrong path, and been swallowed by the system. At Folsom Prison wasn't just music. It was a moment, a protest, a statement. It was the sound of a man outside the walls of privilege shouting, "We're still human." It defied the polished expectations of the music industry and dared to present raw, uncomfortable truth. Cash wasn't just entertaining inmates. He was giving voice to anyone who had ever felt imprisoned, even in ways that didn't involve bars or chains. After Folsom, Johnny Cash was no longer just a country star. He was a cultural force. He visited prisons, stood up for Native American rights, criticized the Vietnam War, and used his platform to speak out against social injustice. And in 1971, he directly addressed one of the questions he was most often asked. "Why do you always wear black?" The song Man in Black was his answer. Part confession, part mission statement. In it, Cash removed the mask and revealed the heart beneath. He wasn't chasing empty fame anymore. He wanted his music to mean something. And with that, he transformed from a country icon into a voice of moral clarity, speaking and singing for the misunderstood, the misjudged, and the broken. Johnny Cash scored several more hits in the 1970s, most notably A Thing Called Love in 1972 and One Piece at a Time in 1976. A Thing Called Love is a powerful ballad about how love transcends all earthly forces. Through a series of vignettes, Cash sings about people who could overcome anything except love, highlighting its mysterious, transformative power. The message is simple but profound. Love can change even the strongest and most stubborn among us. Meanwhile, One Piece at a Time reveals Cash's lighter, humorous side. The song tells the story of a Cadillac factory worker who decides to steal a car by smuggling out its parts one by one over several years. The result? A comically mismatched, Frankenstein-like car assembled from decades of model changes. It's a tongue-in-cheek tribute to the working-class dream of owning something luxurious, no matter how absurd the method. The song reflects Cash's signature compassion for the little man and his ability to turn even outlandish scenarios into folk poetry. Yet the most personal addition to his legacy during this time came not in music, but in family. June gave birth to their son, John Carter Cash. In 1980, at age 48, Cash became the youngest living person ever inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. As in previous decades, he kept a relentless pace throughout the 1980s, frequently collaborating with other artists. In 1986, he reunited with old Sun Records peers Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Roy Orbison to record the nostalgic album The Class of '55. Around the same time, he joined forces with Chris Christopherson, Willie Nelson, and Waylon Jennings to form the Highwaymen, a supergroup that released 3 studio albums between 1985 and 1995. In the early 1990s, Cash expanded his artistic range, recording The Wanderer with U2 for their 1993 album Zauropa. But as the years went on, his health began to deteriorate. In 1983, he underwent abdominal surgery, and in 1988, he required a double heart bypass. Still, true to form, he pressed on. In 1992, Cash was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, affirming his impact beyond country music. 2 years later, he began an unlikely but groundbreaking collaboration with producer Rick Rubin. Their first album together, American Recordings, 1994, was stripped down to just Cash's voice and acoustic guitar. The raw sound captivated a younger generation and earned him the Grammy for Best Contemporary Folk Album. A second album with Rubin, Unchained, 1996, soon followed. Toward the late 1990s, Cash's health worsened significantly. He was diagnosed with Shy-Drager syndrome, a rare neurodegenerative disorder, later corrected to autonomic neuropathy. He was hospitalized repeatedly for pneumonia, including a near-fatal episode in 2001 that left him in a coma for 8 days. Despite these hardships, Cash continued to record. In 2002, he released American Ivor, The Man Comes Around, an album blending originals and hauntingly personal covers, including songs by the Beatles, Sting, and 9 Inch Nails. Among them was Hurt, a searing reinterpretation of Trent Reznor's 1995 song. Cash's version became a critical sensation. The video, featuring flashbacks to his youth, love, and mortality, won the Grammy Award for Best Short-Form Music Video in 2004. While Reznor initially described the cover as invasive, he later admitted it felt like Cash had made the song his own, saying, "That song isn't mine anymore." But behind the success was a deep personal loss. In May 2003, June Carter Cash died, devastating her husband. Even so, Johnny kept working. With Rubin, he completed the material that would become American V, 100 Highways. He finished his final song just 1 week before his death, on September 12, 2003, due to complications from diabetes. He was 71. Posthumously, Cash was honored at the 2003 Country Music Association Awards, where American Number 4 won Album of the Year, and Hurt claimed Single of the Year and Music Video of the Year. It was a fitting tribute to an artist who had walked through fire and sang his truth to the end. Johnny Cash's legacy is not just the story of a star, it's the story of a man. A man who stumbled, broke, loved, repented, and rose again, time after time. His music never grows old because it never chased trends. It spoke eternal truths about the human soul. He was the man in black, an artist who gave voice to the voiceless, who wore his pain like armor and turned it into song. And in that black, he became timeless. Johnny Cash will remain etched in our memory, not just as a musician, but as a symbol of redemption, defiance, and deep, unshakable humanity.